This show is intended for general purposes only, as individual situations may vary. Statements made should not be relied upon as recommendations or solicitation. When discussed, past performance is no guarantee or indication of future results. Nelson Financial Planning offers securities through Nelson Ivest Brokerage Services, member FINRA, and SIPC.
Good Sunday morning. This is Bud Hettinger. Next on News Radio 93.1 WFLA, the longest-running radio show in Central Florida, Dollars and Cents, with my good friend Joel Garris from Nelson Financial Planning. You can call him at the office this week at 407-629-6477 to schedule your free consultation to discuss your retirement plans, or you can talk to him right now at 407-916-5400.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the program Dollars and Cents. My name is Joel Garris here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. On the program today, we're celebrating an anniversary of sorts, an anniversary that actually happened yesterday, March the 9th. So we will talk a little bit about that and what that anniversary is. And then thought this might be an interesting topic for the show this morning, and that is, can under what circumstances can kids actually collect Social Security? And there's a couple of circumstances where, in fact, they can collect Social Security. So to set that up, I want you to be thinking about this statistic, where in America today, 2.6 million grandparents are raising their grandchildren. 2.6 million grandparents raising their children. That's the tie-in to how kids could potentially collect Social Security. So we'll talk about that. Certainly an interesting topic, and one that you might not think is possible, but in fact it is. So and then of course we will also take your calls at 407-916-5400, toll free 1-866-916-5400. In the midst of tax season, which always generates its share of questions on a regular basis, and I'm sure at some point in the program we'll talk a little bit of taxes as well, because there's always much to talk about on that. But let's start by talking about the anniversary that was yesterday. So yesterday was March 9th, 2019. It marked the 10-year anniversary of sort of the bottom of the market in the year 2009. If you recall the events of 2008, obviously that was the unraveling of the real estate bubble. And then from there, it wound up really, the fall of October 2008 was pretty dramatic between mid-September and mid-November. So basically 60 calendar days, the market actually went down about 40%. So not a very easy time to be an investor. And then going into 2009, January, February were also relatively rough months as well. And on March the 9th, 2009, the S&P 500 closed at 676.53. That marked the bottom, and obviously looking back, we know that it marked the bottom because since then, the return in the S&P 500 has been 411%. Stop and think about that. 411%. That's a magnitude of 4. That more than repaired the damage from 2008. And in fact, if you look at the annualized return, and again, it's a deceiving number And that's why in prior programs we've talked a little bit about this. So often when you look at the performance of an investment or a fund, you look at the 10-year number. And the 10-year number, in fact, today is quite deceiving, because as you're measuring that 10-year number, it's based upon that the very lowest point, right? And so all of it subsequent to the lowest point has been up, and so consequently, it's a little deceiving, particularly when so if you look at the number of the annualized return on the S&P 500, it's almost 18% per year going back 10 years. Again, coming off of that low point. So one of the things you've got to be mindful about, particularly with this 10-year anniversary, is the 10-year number on your investments doesn't really show you the impact and the true nature of how that investment performs during both good and bad times, because for the most part, it's pretty much been on the good side over the course of the past 10 years. So one of the things that you've got to do is to spend some time tracking down longer-term numbers, like 15-year term numbers, in order to get a better indication of exactly what the fair performance is of a fund. Because if you just look at the past 10 years, and you're really sort of cherry-picking. I mean, you wouldn't have needed to use a whole lot of aptitude over the course of the past 10 years to get a pretty decent number, because the market was sort of at your back, if you will. I mean, a 411% increase in the market, that's pretty obviously a very, very strong number, and one that is now in the 10-year number. So you've really got to take the time, and most places will only publish the 10-year number. You really got to take the time to track down that 15-year number, because that's going to give you a much better indication of how things actually perform through not just good times, but also bad times. And so be mindful of that as you look at the performance of your investments, or look at the performance of alternative investments, that the 10-year number is certainly a little skewed. Interestingly, during that 10-year period of time, there's been no less than 6 different times where the market has declined by at least 10%, and has yet to break that 20% threshold, if you will. Certainly came close in December of this past year, but 6 different times where you've seen the market have a lot of volatility to the downside, between 10 and 20% declines. There was one in 2010, another in 2011, another in 2015, then 2016, and then actually a couple last year in 2018, one in February, and then, of course, the one that was in November, December. So, those corrections are the reasons why people get distracted and miss out on the kinds of returns that the market generates over time. But you've also got to be looking at it over the right period of time. And so consequently, that 10-year number looks much better than, and doesn't really tell the true story of what the performance has been over time. So we encourage you to kind of really look at the 15-year number. That's probably the most significant takeaway from the celebration of the anniversary that happened yesterday, the 10-year anniversary of the market bottom coming out of the 2008 financial crisis. And certainly interesting to see how many different times during that period where there have been significant declines in the market as it's been motoring along. And those declines certainly are the reasons why folks find it easily distracted when it comes to investments and owning investments. It sometimes sounds far too simple when we talk about being consistent, being diversified, and rebalancing from time to time. But in practice, and certainly the numbers bear out, that that can be some of the most difficult things to do. So we thought we would note that anniversary of March 9th, 2009. Now, 10 years. Bottom line takeaway is if you're looking at investment options, you've really got to look beyond that 10-year number, because it really it's the strength of that 10-year number. You're going to look and be like, wow, that's a huge number. And the reality is that for the next few months and probably the next couple of years, it will look much stronger because it won't provide that window into both bad times and good. And obviously, if you're looking at the performance of an investment, trying to make decisions on that, you've got to look at both of those time periods in order to get the best possible picture, which, of course, means that you've got to make sure that your investments have at least, at a minimum, north of a 10-year track record. Otherwise, you're probably looking at a fund that is very rosy, very cherry-picked, if you will, in terms of what the performance numbers do. Be careful. The financial services industry, the mutual fund industry, loves to promote that, loves to talk about that. So be careful, because you're going to hear a lot more out of the financial services industry about, our 10-year number is, phenomenal, and hop on in. And the reality is that if the fund was rolled out in 2009, well, of course it's going to be. But you've got to really be looking for funds that have longer track records than that traditional 10-year notion. That's why in the office we don't use any funds that don't have at least a 20-year track record, and may almost be 25 as the years fly by all too quickly on my end. Anyway. We'll take a break, and when we get back from the break, we will talk about Social Security and when kids collect, particularly in the case of those 2.6 million grandparents out there who are raising their grandchildren. So stay tuned for that conversation. Also got some open lines, 407-916-5400. Toll free 1-866-916-5400. Those are the numbers to call in and be a part of the program. You can also send us an email. That email is Joel, Joel, at NelsonFinancialPlanning.com. We'll join you after these messages here on Dollars and Cents News Radio 93.1 WFLA.
iHeartRadio is the easy-to-use app for music and radio. Download the free iHeartRadio app today.
This is Bud Hedinger. You can talk to Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning right now on Dollars and Cents about anything to do with your money by calling 407-916-5400. Give him a call. It's time to make sense of your dollars.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Dollars and Cents. This is Joel Garris here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. The numbers to call in to be a part of the program: 407-916-5400. Toll free 1-866-916-5400. Or the email is Joel, Joel, at NelsonFinancialPlanning.com. If you're wondering why we are on an hour later than normal, well, that's because it was spring forward. So you need to run around the house and reset your clocks, because the time has changed. So everybody was kind of dragging in my house this morning as a result of that lost hour of sleep. But I'm sure we'll catch up with it eventually. Anyway, so an hour later. Speaking of... Well, no, these aren't connected at all, but I'll just segue right into it without the segue. Anyway, when I saw the statistic, I was somewhat surprised. But as I was thinking about the stories and conversations that I have in the office, I thought to myself, well, you know what? I guess there really is a number of grandparents out there who are raising their grandchildren. But I was surprised at kind of how big the number was. 2.6 million, it's estimated, that are raising their grandchildren. And what's interesting about that is that these grandkids might very well be eligible for being able to collect Social Security, and the rules are very specific on that. Okay, and we're talking about minor kids, and certainly whether it's parents or grandparents. So, say for example, if you're like Richard Gere, who just had a child at the age of 69, your child, if you're taking Social Security, that child would also be able to collect Social Security. Now, you may be shaking your head at that and saying, "My goodness, why would Social Security, allow the child to collect just because one of his parents was older?" Well, I don't make the rules of Social Security, and last I checked, that's why the finances weren't in particularly good shape. But not to digress on that, the reality is it's a benefit out there, and if you have a child that is the child can't be married, obviously, got to be younger than 18, or could be 19, but they've still got to be in high school. And in those circumstances, you could have benefits be paid to a child, a grandchild that was where you had legal custody. You got to have legal custody. It can't just be, the grandkids are living with me for a little bit until the parents get out. No, I mean there's a definite specificity to this, particularly if you're going to go down this path of having the kids try and collect on Social Security. You've got to have legal custody and financial responsibility for the grandchild. The age of those kids has got to be under that age 18. But let's say we look at a very simple example. So if let's say it's a grandparent and they're 67, they're collecting Social Security of $1,500. Let's say that he's got a grandchild that he now has legal custody of, and that's the key concept. You got to have legal custody. The child, in fact, can receive up to 50% of his benefit until the age of 18. So that's a payout that's relatively significant that certainly you want to be able to be taking advantage of, because obviously if you're a grandparent and all of a sudden there are kids back in the house, that's probably not something that you plan for in your retirement. And so this feature of Social Security that allows children to collect is certainly a powerful financial feature that is available. And obviously the kids have got to be minors. They've got to be under 18 or still in high school and under 19. And you have to have legal custody. It can't be kind of just one of those things where the kids are living with you. It's got to be actual legal custody. And the other parameter is that you have to start collecting Social Security. So it's not a situation where they can collect if you're not collecting. You've got to be collecting, and then the kids can correspondingly collect. So say, for example, you're 63, you're holding off on collecting, but you've got minor kids in the house. The reality is that the kids are not going to be able to collect until you collect. What's fascinating about this, the rules is that if you are 63, right, and you start to collect Social Security, well, then, as you know, the benefit would be reduced from what it would be at your full retirement age. But even though your benefit as the person eligible for Social Security is in fact reduced, the child's benefit, or the grandchild's benefit, more likely than not, is not reduced, which is really kind of fascinating when you stop and think about it. Is that so you're 62, 63, 64, you decide to collect Social Security early. There's children in the house that you've got full legal custody of. They can, in fact, collect not 50%, not based upon what your number is at that reduced rate, but based upon that number that is your full retirement benefit. So pretty fascinating kind of how the rules work when you start talking about children and more often than not grandchildren. Often rare that you get the Richard Gere example, but sometimes that can happen. But as long as they are minors and you've got full custody, then they're eligible to collect. Once you start collecting, what's even kind of more interesting, I guess, is that they have the ability to collect 50% of your full benefit, even though you may not be collecting your full benefit because you elected to collect it early. So pretty interesting in terms of how that plays out. Certainly a feature of Social Security that helps grandparents if they have the unforeseen circumstances of having a child or a grandchild live with them. Again, got to have full legal custody, and they must be collecting. The kids can't collect unless you are collecting. There is a maximum that can be paid out. Typically, that's 150 to 180% of your full retirement benefits, but that can be a pretty significant payout. So certainly something to be aware of in terms of kind of one of those oddities or unique features about Social Security that applies in kind of a situation that, interestingly, not as rare as you might think. As I'm thinking about conversations that we had in the office of late, combined with the numbers, when you look at 2.6 million grandparents raising their grandchildren, that's a pretty significant number. I doubt that was anticipated, and so to leave some of the financial burden is this feature of Social Security where they can collect up to 50%. Each child can collect up to 50% of what they would be getting at full retirement age. That's even kind of more unique, is regardless of whether they applied early, the kids will collect 50% of what they would get at full retirement age. So certainly some interesting stuff there, and perhaps you know somebody in that position. Certainly, if the conversation comes up, it might be worth saying, hey, are the kids collecting on your record? Because they're certainly eligible to do. So some interesting features of Social Security that's out there. It just amazes me just how much and how little folks don't know about Social Security. This is just one of those other kind of more unique pieces of Social Security that are in fact out there. So keep an eye out for that. If you know of somebody or encounter somebody that's in that position, certainly worth suggesting that, because many people don't know about that feature of Social Security that allows children to collect if their custodian is already collecting. So interesting stuff on that. We're at the bottom half of the hour already. My goodness. So we will take a break. We get back from the break. We will continue the conversation here on Dollars and Cents. This is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. You are listening to News Radio 93.1 WFLA.
This is Bud Hedinger. You can talk to Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning right now on Dollars and Cents about anything to do with your money by calling 407-916-5400. Give him a call. It's time to make sense of your dollars.
Hey, welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. This is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. You're listening to News Radio 93.1 WFLA. Hello over there to our friends on the AM dial at 540 AM as well. The numbers to call on in and be a part of the program, 407-916-5400. Toll free 1-866-916-5400, or you can send us a email which goes straight to this handy-dandy little fabulous device called a cell phone at Joel, Joel, at NelsonFinancialPlanning.com. That's how you can get in touch with us. Perhaps you're working through your taxes. You got about a month to go, so get on it. Otherwise, that date will be upon us. This year, it is, in fact, April 15. In past few years, it seems like the calendar always fell kind of uniquely in that you wound up having an extra day, or with the weekend, extra few days, because of a unique holiday that existed in Washington, D.C., and so that always sort of pushed the date. If you live in Maine and Massachusetts, you do wind up having an extra day because of Patriots Day. But for the rest of us, it is, in fact, April 15. The good news is, if you are a last-minute person, which hopefully you really don't want to do that on your taxes, particularly this year, a lot of changes. So you really want to kind of work it through, combined with the fact that, as we've talked about in previous programs, you may have a surprise, and you may want a few days to figure out how to handle said surprise. But April 15th this year falls on a Monday. So that is, falls on Monday, April 15th. So at least you got a weekend if you're holding off, but I would encourage you not to do that, simply because you may wind up with a little different result given all of the different tax changes that have occurred. In this segment of the program, we want to share an option that you've got that is also kind of little known, but an interesting trick, if you will, that allows you to get a retirement account with, even though you may not be eligible to fund one. And given that we actually encountered this situation a couple of times this past week in the office, we thought, well, maybe it's actually happening more and more. And so what the situation is when you fund a retirement account, whether it's an IRA or whether it's a Roth, there are, in fact, different income parameters that apply that determine your eligibility to do that, okay? With an IRA, to do an IRA and take a tax deduction for it, the first question you have to ask is whether your employer offers a plan or not. And it doesn't matter whether you are participating in that plan or not. It just matters if your employer offers one. And if you don't know the answer to that question, if you look at your W-2 in box 13, if there's an X in box 13, then they offer one, because that's where they have to kind of note that. If it's blank, then okay, they don't, and then that means you can do an IRA and get a tax deduction for it. But you also have to be aware of, okay, what's going on with my spouse? Do they have an employer who offers a 401k? So it's almost like a kind of like a decision tree, if you will, on whether, in fact, you can get a tax deduction for your IRA or not. And it starts with, does my employer offer? Okay, and kind of goes from there. One of the main parts of that decision tree then becomes income and total income. And depending upon how much income you make, then you wind up being limited in terms of whether you can deduct that IRA or not. The only exception to that is if neither one of you are covered by an employer plan of any kind, then you can always, regardless of income, make a tax-deductible contribution to an IRA. But if either of you then are covered, then there's different income parameters to start to look at that determine whether you, in fact, you can make a tax-deductible contribution to an IRA. Key being tax-deductible contribution. You can always make a non-deductible contribution to an IRA, and that's going to be important here as we sort of explain what we're talking about here in terms of getting a tax benefit, even though it was a non-deductible IRA. And for that, then we turn our attention to the Roth. And the Roth is the option that while you don't get a tax deduction now, you wind up saving money in the future when you take that money out, because it's after tax money. So when you look at that from that perspective, however, there are still income limits that apply as to whether, in fact, you can do a Roth account. And those limits generally, if you are married, it starts to kick in about $193,000, and beyond, if you're single, it's $122,000. So once you're above those income limits, then you're not allowed to do a Roth contribution. So again, those income limits come into to play in both circumstances. But, and here's the caveat, and here's how you wind up being able to sort of do the Roth, if you will, through the back door. So let's come back to a couple of different parameters on the IRA. Remember, I said the IRA, you can make that contribution regardless of income, and you can still contribute to it, but it's not going to be deductible. So it's a non-deductible IRA contribution. Okay, so that's piece one, if you will. Piece two is the fact that you can convert IRAs to Roths at any income level, and that didn't used to be the case. It used to be that your income had to be under $100,000, and that was the only way to convert. Not the case now. Any amount of income on your tax return, you can convert an IRA to a Roth. Now, frankly, I don't know why you would do that if you're at a high income level. Then certainly that's not a course that we regularly recommend in the office. But stay with me on these two pieces. So I've got piece one, which is a non-deductible IRA contribution that I did. And then the reality is that there's no income limitation on a Roth conversion. And so if you're in the state of your income being at a level where you're not able to do the IRA as a tax deduction, and similarly, you're not able to do the Roth because you make too much money, what you can do is put these two pieces together and ultimately do a conversion through the back door. If you do an IRA and don't take the tax deduction for it, which you're always allowed to do, and then take advantage of the fact that regardless of the amount of income, you can do a conversion, the technique is that you would set up a separate IRA, because you don't really want to commingle this with your other IRA assets, because with this approach, you are able to do the conversion and basically pay zero in taxes. So let's walk through that in a little bit of detail. Okay, so I fund an IRA today. Right, and again, we did a couple of these just this past week. Fund an IRA today. I don't take a tax deduction for it, but it's funded today, and because it was non-deductible, then basically it's all after-tax money in that IRA. I then the very next day do the conversion, because see, when you do the conversion, you would have to pay tax on whatever profit happened in the IRA account. Well, if you're doing it the next day, then there's not really going to be a lot of profit because it's the very next day. And because you didn't take a tax deduction for that IRA, then there's nothing to report. There's no tax implications on that conversion, and thereby you wind up being able to make a Roth contribution, a la this conversion through the back door, if you will, regardless of how much money you make, which is pretty powerful, pretty interesting stuff when you start to pull some of these different pieces together that allows you to do the Roth through a conversion using IRA contributions that were not deductible in the first place. So a pretty clever technique, if you will. But a couple of the parameters that you really want to observe to not get tripped up on triggering taxes, and that is really create a separate IRA for this one so you can really track that money and not commingle it with any other IRA monies that you've had before, because then you could very well trigger some tax implications on that. But because you did this separately, you didn't take the tax deduction on the IRA. It's all after tax, and there's no tax consequence for that. And then you immediately do the conversion the next day, and there you have it. You wound up with a Roth, even though you weren't eligible to do a Roth. You wound up with a little bit of paperwork being able to do the Roth anyway. So a little loophole, if you will, in how those pieces in the tax code work together to provide you with the opportunity to kind of do this approach. But you've really got to observe some specific parameters as to how to keep that money separate from everything else, because you don't want to then trigger taxes, because that's where we would have a problem doing a conversion, is if you're in a high tax bracket, high income, and then all of a sudden you're doing a conversion and paying a bunch of taxes. We just don't know why you would do that at a high tax rate, particularly when most people see that their tax rates in retirement either stay the same or go down a little bit. So some interesting stuff on that. So hopefully that gave you something to ponder about as well. And with that, we will slide to a break. During the break, we've got open lines, 407-916-5400, toll free 1-866-916-5400. Those are the numbers to call and be on in and be a part of the program. We will be back after these messages.
This is Bud Hedinger. You know, you can talk to Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning right now on Dollars and Cents about anything to do with your money by calling 407-916-5400. Give him a call. It's time to make sense of your dollars.
Hey, welcome back to the program, Dollars and Cents, here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA, 540 AM. This is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. We'll slide to the lines. We got Frank in Orlando. Hey, good morning, Frank. How are you?
Good morning, Joel. How are you?
I'm good. It looks like it's going to be a hot day out there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day. I'm enjoying it so far. All is good.
Perfect. How can I help?
I got a question for you. I appreciate the information you provide, and I was just listening to the Social Security issue. I'll be real quick. Myself and my wife are both 66. Our goal was to wait until 70 to collect Social Security. And I was doing some reading lately that said maybe we should file for, have my wife file, who's the lower wage earner of the two, and I should file for spousal benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And I did one of those Social Security calculators, and it seems to say that over the maximized benefit, it's going to cost me $28,000 to do that, essentially to collect maybe $80,000 in the next 3 years, which I think is probably a good idea. And I'm just wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, Frank, that's the online calculators are great, but one of the limitations is they kind of do a sum total of all of the benefits over an extended period of time, and I think what's important is to kind of look at where the break even point is on that, rather than the sum total, out to age 90. Do you recall how far out that calculator went in terms of kind of the sum total numbers? Usually they run out to about 85 or 90.
To be honest with you, I didn't really. I just started reading about this about 2 days ago. I just did it last night, and I do not. I don't even know that I paid attention to that number.
Well, that's important, because obviously, Frank, an online calculator can kind of make any number look like any number depending upon what the assumptions are behind that. And so what we find when we do the analysis on this Social Security stuff is that in terms of real dollars, you start to break even at about age 78 or 80, okay? Somewhere in that kind of age range when you're kind of looking at these numbers. And so the question that we always ask is, what's your lifestyle look like and what's going on? Because the reality is that you, in fact, need more money when you are younger, because when you are younger, that's when you're more active and you have a tendency to spend money when you are active. So our philosophy is to kind of really don't just look at the sum total of those numbers on those online calculators, but really look at sort of where those numbers sort of cross. And at what age is that and really try and think about what your life looks like between now and then. And, of course, the reality is that, look, the dollars that you're going to get when you're age 85, they're not nearly as valuable just simply with the time value of money and the eroding effect of inflation. They're not nearly as valuable to you as those dollars that you would get today. So, Frank, I think you're certainly on the right track in terms of kind of looking at, well, wait a minute, if I'm going to get $80,000 in pocket over the next 3 years, but it's going to shortchange me, $28,000 over the next 25 years. Yeah, I probably would take the $80,000 and have that in pocket. So that's probably a pretty good analysis. But I'd encourage you to take it kind of one step further, see where those break-even points are. Usually they happen at around age 78 or 80. And certainly worth taking advantage of those numbers. The run up in Social Security is great if you don't necessarily need the money and you're still working or something like that. Are you still working, Frank, or are you fully retired?
I still work a little, and I do not need the money at all. Okay, but it just seems because, everything would be easy if I knew when I was going to die. But I don't know that. So I figure if I can get the 80,000, get that now, and,
might as well.
That would be good. So
I would agree with that. And the technique of her applying and you applying spousally, that doesn't affect your ability to go back in and apply later on. So some good thinking on that, Frank. I'd keep chewing on it, but that sounds like a great option.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your help.
All right. Very good. Good stuff out there in terms of some of the options that you can look at within Social Security. A lot of online calculators out there, and we've seen some of the reports on some of these online calculators. Matter of fact, we had, we still do have software in the office where we can put in different variables and kind of spit it out. And the thing that always bothered me about, the fancy 15-page report that the software spit out is it didn't identify really or highlight, kind of where that break-even point was. And it certainly did not include consideration of the time value of money. And I think those are some of the things that you've got to be thinking about when it comes to Social Security and how that benefit plays out, particularly how it changes at different ages along the way. And then, as Frank mentioned, once you roll the spousal benefits feature in, then that also is changes the analysis as well. So definitely take a hard look at those and understand that a lot of the online calculators or pretty little reports that you'll get really sort of sum total things up rather than identify sort of break even points, if you will. So just make sure that you're looking at it from that perspective rather than the sum total, because sometimes those sum totals will run out to age 90 or 95, and who knows what that who knows what that looks like. What I can say with certainty, though, is that the value of those dollars won't be nearly as much as the dollars that you would be collecting today. So certainly some good stuff to think about as it relates to Social Security. In other news, I don't know if you caught this. Ollie, I'm not interested in turning the show political, but man, some of these proposals that the old Democrats are rolling out, I just. So here's the latest one. Okay, it's courtesy of Democratic presidential candidate Cory Booker. He has proposed a government-funded savings account for newborn children called the American Opportunity Account. Well, that sounds pretty good. Okay. It would be established with $1,000 for every child born in this country. Each year, okay, there would be anywhere from $0 to $2,000 added to said American Opportunity account. Obviously, 0 to 2,000, that range is going to be directly dependent upon the size of the family's income. Here's the part that I mean, just put that aside for just a second. Here's the part that I always love when they talk about let's offer a government-sponsored account, a government-funded savings account. So what do you suppose that said government account is going to be invested in? Who's going to manage that? Well, good folks at the Treasury Department. Okay, and what do you suppose they're going to own in there? Oh, well, treasuries. Okay, issued by the Treasury Department. And so that means that this account, okay, is going to be tied to have a rate of return of about 3% per year. Congratulations. That stays with inflation and nothing more. Oh, how the heck are you going to fund this thing, by the way? Really? Oh, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not a zero-sum game. You need money to fund this stuff. Where's that coming from? You know, we know the statistics. We've talked about them before on the percentage of the top 10% taxpayers, right, that pay 60% of all tax revenue. How much more are you going to go on that? Anyway. All right. Had to get that off my chest. Sorry about that. We'll wrap it up and get on out of here. Y'all have a great rest of the Sunday. You've been listening to Dollars and Cents. This is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning on News Radio 93.1 WFLA.
Fees, commissions, expenses, investment costs come in all shapes and sizes. Do you know how much your investments are really costing you? At Nelson Financial Planning, we believe that costs should be a major consideration in your financial plan. After all, the lower your costs are, the more you get to keep for yourself. This is Joel Garris, and I invite you to get educated about your investment costs. Visit NelsonFinancialPlanning.com or call us today at 407-629-6477 to set up a personal conversation to review your investment costs. That's NelsonFinancialPlanning.com or 407-629-6477 to set up that conversation.
A-plus Better Business Bureau accredited. Nelson Financial Planning offers securities through Nelson Ivest Brokerage Services. Member SIPC and FINRA. Listen to Joel Garris on Dollars and Cents every Sunday at 9 a.m. on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. This show is intended for general purposes only, as individual situations may vary. Statements made should not be relied upon as recommendations or solicitation. When discussed, past performance is no guarantee or indication of future results. Nelson Financial Planning offers securities through Nelson Ivest Brokerage Services, member FINRA, and SIPC.